So here's a few thoughts while I'm hiking back down Mt Greylock after a little thunderbolt run, a training run in anticipation of hiking some of the presidential range next week. Anyway, the ideas I'm rolling over my head right now consist of kind of my views on freedom. Like one of them simply being that, like when you're free, you get to choose as much as possible what you're doing, why you're doing it, where you're doing it, who you're doing it for, how you're doing it, etc., etc. It's very nice to have all those choices. And in life, with mature adults, you have to negotiate about things that get done. You know, when you have relationships where things are consensual and you decide and agree on what you're going to do, where, when, how, and why, then things are pretty amicable. When you have anyone that's grossly selfish, that just demands control and bullies or forces everyone around them to do their bidding without regard for who they are and what, how it affects them. To me, this completely violates Jesus' kind of main commandment, being do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if you're forcing things on people that they don't want to do, then you're being entirely selfish and you're not obeying that commandment. So anyone that claims to be a Christian and completely openly violates that simple commandment of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, then they're not a Christian. They might claim to be, they might wear a cross, they might wave a flag, they might do all kinds of things, even going to church, pretending to be a Christian, but that's not in their heart. And it's the hearts and minds that are the important part of who we are. So, and then a different, completely unrelated thought is I was thinking about war and how war is like a kind of a terrible way to resolve any kind of issue. And there are times when there's no other apparent choice, especially if you're being aggressed against and have to respond to it somehow. And so my philosophy about this is, I sometimes people will, because I do protest against the whole fascist regime, and I don't like it at all. And there's people that say, oh, you're wasting your time protesting, you're wasting your time posting things on social media. But the other day, my answer came to me, what I would say to them, it's simply this, is there's a lot of people out there thinking they're doing some kind of good by destroying bodies and property, bombing people, killing people, all this sort of stuff. My attitude is, if there's absolutely no choice, I'll take up arms, but my preference is to reach out and try to change some hearts and minds, because in my view of life, fear is a very strong but very negative motivator, and people don't realize the majority of us on this earth were put here without being prepared for what came, and fear is a predominant kind of worldview or whatever, and causes people to be motivated to look out for themselves and be in competition for resources, and they're fearing things, and based on fear, people develop racism and hate and other negative motives that will drive them to do evil things, not realizing we're all essentially the same and we have very similar needs and desires, and that, we look at somebody that's not in our tribe, and if they're a different race, creed, or color, or other variables, we tend to want to reject them, and we're afraid of them. So that's where a lot of what's going on comes from. Whereas love was what Jesus preached, and it was more like, hey, it's a totally different way to live. You trust. Like, to me, freedom and peace are based on trust. And when there's distrust, which springs from fear, you can't have, a good relationship with anybody, not even whether it's one-on-one or, a country or the whole world. Without trust, nothing really runs very smoothly. Everything has to be put in legalese and negotiated and enforced and all this kind of stuff. Surveillance and, rat people out culture and negative things like that prevent things from smoothly flowing. And there's no love in that. Love, as Paul reiterated, fumbling for the right word here, but anyway, the way he expressed in the love chapter in Corinthians, that love was patient and long-suffering and kind, keeps no record of wrongs. Love is a difficult thing to actually apply because it's a little risky. Instead of defending yourself and being ready to shoot everybody that looks at you wrong, you've got to be willing to trust people and open yourself up a little bit and, forgive people when they do screw up. And, I think we're in a world now where there's too many people caught up in the whole negative fear thing and not enough in the love thing. Even among people, like tribalism is funny because there's people that, are in a tribe, and within the tribe, people accept each other and love each other, and all the things that apply in the tribe really need to be able to be applied outside the tribe, but people are afraid of the other guy. And, if we can agree and meet in the middle and communicate, a lot of times you can overcome all this kind of stuff. If you're not afraid and responding, with suspicion and fear and accusation and all this kind of stuff, so for things to flow smoothly, you have to be able to let your guard down. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, part of my thinking about this was the fact that I would much prefer to reach people's hearts and minds. And in my belief, hearts and minds go on forever. Bodies and property do not. When we leave this earth, we leave the bodies and the property behind. We move on. So if people live out their life, looking only at the temporary things and the physical things, and, they're out there destroying bodies and property in the name of some cause and not realizing that when this is all over, hearts and souls move on. So my hope with whatever I do is to help maybe convince people that love and not fear is the best way to go. And if I can reach hearts and minds rather than destroying property and bodies, that's far to be preferred. And, use weapons and taking up arms as a last resort. It's unfortunately seems inevitable in this world that it's going to happen, but I think there's a better way. And if enough people become enlightened and believe in the fact that love is really the answer to everything, even though it sounds kind of Pollyanna and simplistic, moving in the direction of love is really where life comes from, whether it's, with yourself. If you don't like yourself, you got to work that out and accept yourself. And then, your relationships, you can't completely control everybody around you. In fact, you can't control anybody around you, really. You have to just seek agreement and be willing to do some compromising and negotiating, make things work. You have to respect everybody else. So, mutual respect is a huge part of this whole thing. When you meet somebody, just going on the assumption that they are as valuable and as important as you are, and that their needs are important, and that meeting everybody's needs is necessary if we're all going to get along and make things work. So it is possible for people to get along and make things work. And if you opt to do negative things, then you basically cut off that possibility. So the trick is to keep that possibility of things working out open. So in other words, that's why Jimmy Carter, for example, would go to the table and really, just strive for peace, strive for an agreement, strive for something that would actually work so that people could function and keep functioning and work out, some agreement to buy time. Time is kind of a funny thing. On earth there's time, in heaven apparently there's no time. Everything sort of is timeless and simultaneous. Here, we're always trying to buy time, whether it's getting a new car and knowing it and that in 15 years it's going to be a junkyard, but you're buying time by doing repairs and maintenance and, even making peace agreements. You're buying time. If you buy 5 years without a war, that's good. If you can buy 10, that's better. But once you start bombing people, you've just eliminated that option and closed the door. So part of the trick of peace and getting along with people is just to, negotiate, buy time, think things through, recognize everybody's needs are about the same, and then we have a shot at getting where we want to get. So that's kind of my point there. I'd rather, if possible, reach hearts and minds with a few bits of wisdom that I've picked up along the way and try to apply what Jesus said and what other people said that made sense and, was clearly on the right track. And I feel like, at this point in my life, I'm 67, I feel like, I'm not there yet, but I think I'm on the right path. Things are starting to clarify and make more sense. And, if you think and seek the truth, the Bible says if you seek the truth, you'll find it. And if you know the truth will make you free. So, that's the thing to be searching for, putting down the prejudices and listening to the truth and, really looking for what works, not just following other people blindly, but learning to think for yourself critically, think critically, question everything. Don't fall in line under blind authority. Question everything, every belief, every person. Don't submit to aggressive, negative people and kowtow to them. They'll take away your freedom, and you won't be able to think anymore. You got to fight for it. You kind of do have to fight for it. I love the expression "live free or die." That's kind of become my motto. Give me liberty, give me death. I get where that came from. I don't think you can be truly fulfilled as a person and reach your highest and best if you're not free. You have other people dominating you and making you do their will and doing your thinking for you. You're not free, you're a slave. And that's why slavery is utterly repulsive to me. If you hire someone and pay them a fair wage, that's a job, that's a legit thing. But enslaving people and make them do what you want to do and using them and abusing them, that's just pure evil. It's evil. I don't care who you are. So, we fought for freedom, and I'm willing to keep fighting for freedom whatever way I know how to do, because I don't like the idea of any one man dominating my world. It's unacceptable, especially, hardened, callous, selfish, rapist type people. They're not my friends. They violate people. They don't respect people. That's not good. That's just pure evil. So anyway, that's my spiel for today, even though it's maybe a little bit negative. And the idea is to keep hope open as a possibility and do resist and fight in whatever way you can, preferably peacefully. But, in this world, you got to do what you got to do. So anyway, that's that. I'm getting down near the bottom of Mt Greylock, so I will sign off here and get to the bottom. Take care.